Hello, it's Martin from Wisely Automotive, and behind me are just some of our BMW i3Ss. However, this one suffers from one of the most common issues we come across. And infuriatingly, it's nothing to do with the design of the vehicle, rather previous owners and in some case dealers messing things up by putting incorrect tires on the rear axle. In case you haven't had the pleasure of replacing the tires on your BMW i3, let me start with a quick history lesson. And to keep everything simple, I will just focus on the summer tires. If you want to learn more, we have already done an in-depth video about all the tire combinations on i3s, and I will leave that linked in the top right-hand corner. But let's get into it, starting with the standard non-S i3. The complete base models came on 19-inch 427 style alloys, which do look a little bit boring, and importantly are a square setup. This means that the front and rear alloys are the same 5-inch width and are shod with the same 155mm wide tires. If you wanted to spruce things up a bit, like let's be honest most people did, or your car came with the range extender, it would utilize the same wheel and tire setup on the front, but you would get a wider 5.5-inch alloy in combination with a 175mm tire on the rear axle, regardless of the design and whether it was the 19 or 20-inch diameter. Luckily, on all i3Ss like this one, it's nice and simple. The front alloys are always 5.5J, so the same as on the rear axle of the non-S, shod with the same 175mm wide tire, and on the rear axle the alloys are wider yet again, being 6J with a 195mm wide tire. And the alloys are obviously always 20-inch in diameter. Regardless of whether we are talking about the i3 non-S, S or the alloy wheel specification, the factory fit summer tire was always the same, and that's the Bridgestone Ecopia EP500. However, while the i3 was on the market, some other manufacturers have joined the game as well, namely Michelin with the Primacy and Continental with the EcoContact 6 summer tires. That's for the non-sport variants of the i3. However, with the dimensions of the rear 20-inch wheels being identical to the front alloys of an S, we are essentially covered for alternatives on the front. The problem becomes on the rear axle with the very unique 195/50 tire dimension. I say unique, but this is also actually shared with another BMW. Certain specifications of the i8 use that tire on top of their own 6J alloy front wheels. The big catch, with the i8 being much more performance-oriented rather than the efficiency-focused smaller i3, it also utilizes a different tire. Still a Bridgestone, but instead of the Ecopia EP500, it's a Potenza. That's the mix setup this example is on, and while the previous owner would have saved about £5 per rear tire, when the time comes to trade a vehicle like this in with us, we need to adjust the value of it based on the fact that we will need to supply two quite expensive brand new rear tires. So they would have ended up being hundreds of pounds down anyways. We used to be a bit more lenient about this particular setup in the past. At the end of the day, they are Bridgestones all around with a BMW specification. But after hearing some horror stories of other mixed tire setups on the i3, we are not taking any chances anymore, and that's the reason why there are brand new Ecopias in the boot. Let's introduce the culprits then. As you can imagine, it's a derivative of an existing tire, so it doesn't differ that much. As for the tire tread depth, which many people care about, they start from not much above 6mm on the first two grooves, yet the third groove is only about 5.5. That brings me on to the elephant in the room, the price, because depending on when and where you are looking, they can be up to £250 each. That's a lot of money for not much tire. Just for context, you know I have a bit of a sweet spot for VW ID3s, which also features slightly awkwardly shaped wheels, being large in diameter but narrow for the size of the car. With those, regardless of whether you're looking at the 19-inch or 20-inch versions, even the premium offerings will come well under £200. Oh, and the obvious comparison, the non-S BMW i3 with the same Ecopia EP500s, under £150. And it's not like they are particularly fantastic tires. As mentioned, there is not much tread from the factory. The hard rubber compound does no wonders for the already stiff ride of the i3S, And if you leave them for extended periods of time in the sun, they seem to like to crack along the tire treads. We were told that's perfectly fine as long as it's superficial, but it doesn't exactly inspire confidence. So we do sympathize that you are frustrated, but there is not much we can do about it. Some people have taken matters into their own hands, and there's plenty of opinions out there on the internet. Whether they're good or bad, that's a completely different question. However, you have to keep in mind you are moving away from the homologated arrangement, such as with option 1, which is fitting a slightly bigger sidewall tire on the rear axle. We have come across this. We service i3s all over the country, and as part of a routine service, we do a road test to make sure that everything is working as expected. And while it may seem like a tiny difference going from a 195/50 to 195/55 tire, which opens up a lot of options, like for example this Michelin Primacy 4+, it really affects the handling and it's borderline dangerous. You may say, okay, what about using the same 195/55 tire on the front axle as well? And this may seem counterintuitive at first because you are going completely away from the official setup. But technically speaking, a 195mm tire will fit onto a 5.5J wheel. Despite now being on the same tire all around, it carries other risks. Like for example, under hard cornering, the bigger tire could deflect and start rubbing against the coil spring. Option 3 is following what's on this vehicle. You can utilize potenzas in the correct dimension on the rear axle, but at that point, why stop there? If money is tight, you can go even cheaper. There are alternatives in the 195/50 dimension. For example, you have got Rotellas, or in the US, you have got Momos. But keep in mind, those are budget-oriented tires, and the same problem persists, where you have to then resort to mixing different tires on the rear and front axle. Do you want the same tire all around? You can make the opposite case to before, utilizing the 175mm tire from the front, also on the rear axle. This opens up options to, for example, those Michelin E-Primacies. Keep in mind, while it is technically possible to fit a 175mm tire onto a 6J wheel, it's really borderline. You are stretching the tire to the maximum and it could lead to abnormal wear and, more importantly, handling. Look, we could keep going on forever with different examples, but you have to realize one thing. These car manufacturers spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds on vehicle development. Yet somehow you think you can just swap tires for whatever you want, move away from the specification, and it will drive the same? It's like putting different oil into a combustion engine vehicle or a coolant and thinking everything will be fine because you know better. And let me crop in for the serious bit, because I will be blunt and hopefully not too rude. Because if you can't pay £250 for a single rear tire on your premium German electric car, then this is not the one for you. You simply have to account for it as an ongoing running cost. Do you still want a funky carbon fiber electric city car? Then feel free to consider the non-S i3. Thanks to more competition, there are cheaper tires on the lower end and very similarly priced but better performing tires on the high end. Also, before experimenting with any of these tires on your i3S, consider speaking to your insurance provider first. In some cases, they may not care at all. Happy days. In other cases, they may raise your premium a bit because they will view it as a modification. And I bet that in the majority of cases, they will refuse to insure you because you are moving away from a homologated setup. And if you are planning to trade the car in shortly with someone like us, for example, where you would want to swap to a younger, higher-end i3S, well, if it doesn't have the correct Ecopia EP500s, then we will chip you anyways. By any chance, if you made this far into the video and you are watching from one of the tire manufacturer's offices, a quick message for you. We completely understand that developing a new tire for a car which is now discontinued is extremely risky business. But you can't believe the number of calls we have to turn down because people are asking for i3S rear tires. And our only answer is the Bridgestones, which we don't supply as we work with Michelin. And by no means do I pretend that I understand tire research and manufacturing, but surely it can't be that difficult to create a tire which is 20 millimeters wider if you already have a couple of smaller variants. And this would not only create sales of the 195 millimeter tire, but also of the 175, which you already poured money into developing, because I'm fairly sure there's more i3Ss out there than i3s with the 20-inch narrower 430 style alloys. And I keep mentioning Michelin because we like and supply their tires. We have already been in touch about this issue with not much of a reply. So this goes out to all the other tire manufacturers as well. Continental, where are you? The opportunity is still out there. Just look at the comments from our previous YouTube videos. People are crying for these tires. And from a business perspective, wouldn't you want to be in a market where you're competing with a single, mediocre, overpriced option? You basically have the market share to yourself. That's it. Your dreams will probably revolve around tires. Haha, get the pun? But the conclusion is simple. The Bridgestones are rubbish, but they are your only option for now. And if you are a tire manufacturer, that means you still have the opportunity to swoop in. Wisely Automotive does not guarantee the success of your business, however. And that's everything. Make sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video and you want it to be seen by more people. If you want to learn more about i3 tires specifically, make sure to check out this video. And if you want to learn more about EVs in general, make sure to subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you in the next one.